A young Chinese girl was attacked and murdered during her jogging. Where her body was discovered, she was found naked. Her skin was marked with signs of unimaginable violence, the brutality of her last moments written across her body. Her lifeless form was left exposed, a tragic sight to behold in the wilderness. The police arrested 19 suspects, one after another, only to find that not a single one matched the killer's DNA. Eventually, after a painstaking effort, the police managed to narrow down the suspect, but the road to justice was filled with obstacles. It took a full 6 years before the killer was finally brought to justice. Why was this girl killed? Who was this bold and reckless killer? Today, let us revisit the case that once shook Malaysia, the murder of Zhu Yuye. On the night of January 14, 2006, at 8:45 p.m., the police in Sungai Petani Kedah, Malaysia, received a chilling call. The caller was Zhu Yuye, a man whose voice trembled with fear as he described the disappearance of his 22-year-old daughter, Zhu Yuye. Along with her younger sister, Zhu Yuchun, she had gone for a run at the Ling Club just after 5 p.m. that afternoon. But hours later, Zhu Yuye had vanished into the shadows, leaving no trace behind. The family searched desperately, their hearts heavy with dread, yet the girl was nowhere to be found. Now, in the grip of terror, Zhu Yuye pleaded for the police to help them. Without hesitation, the authorities dispatched 40 officers and several police dogs to search the area. They scoured the club's grounds, but time passed away, and by the passing of several hours, they were empty-handed. Exhausted and defeated, the search was called off, and planned to rethink the strategy the next day. But as the night closed in, barely an hour after the operation had been halted, another phone call rang out. A code voice on the other end reported something far worse. A female body had been discovered, abandoned at the Ling Club. He said that around 2:30 a.m. on January 15th, he was passing by a recreational club when, in the dim light of the night, he noticed something white in the grass by the roadside. At first, he didn't pay much attention and walked past it, but soon he felt something was wrong. The white object looked too much like a body. He turned back and cautiously parted the grass to take a look. To his horror, the white object turned out to be the lifeless body of a woman. He was terrified and quickly backed away, his heart pounding. After calming himself for a moment, he took out his phone and called the police. About 10 minutes after receiving the call, the police arrived at the scene. After removing the body from the grass, they brought it back to the station. At the station, the forensic doctor performed an initial autopsy on the body. The victim was wearing only a red sports bra on her upper body, which had been pulled up over her chest. Her lower body was naked, and her entire body was covered in signs of beating. The fatal injury that caused her death was a deep stab wound to her neck, inflicted by a sharp weapon. There were also signs of blunt force trauma to her head. In the victim's private and anal areas, the forensic doctor found the semen. After linking the information together, the forensic doctor began to reconstruct these events leading to the victim's death. The sequence of events likely unfolded as follows. After encountering the killer, the victim was assaulted. However, she did not surrender, instead furiously resisting. In a fit of rage, the killer beat her until she could no longer fight back, then proceeded to violate her. Afterward, the killer used a sharp weapon to stab her in the neck, ending her life. While the cause of death had been determined, the police still didn't know the identity of the victim. No items that could prove her identity were found on her. At that point, one of the officers recalled that the body had been discovered at the Ling Club and that Zhu Yuye had gone missing near the same location earlier. The police began to suspect that the woman's body belonged to the missing 22-year-old Chinese girl, Zhu Yuye. The police called in Zhu Yuye's family for identification. After their identification, their suspicion was confirmed. The body indeed belonged to Zhu Yuye. As a result, the police upgraded the previously filed missing person case to a first-degree murder investigation and immediately launched a full investigation. After a thorough investigation of the scene, the police realized with the chilling certainty the place where the body had been discovered was not the crime scene. There were no signs of struggle, no marks of a flight. It was as if the victim had been placed there, discarded like an afterthought. The police shifted their focus, now centered on the area where the body had been dumped, and began to expand their search, combing the surrounding 10 kilometers for any trace. It didn't take long for them to uncover something disturbing: a pool of blood, fresh and stark, near an upscale residential area, just 2 kilometers away. They collected the blood and sent it for comparison with Zhu Yuye's DNA. The results were undeniable. there was the first true clue, a match, confirming their growing suspicion. The real crime scene, they now believed, was somewhere in this area. To further piece together the puzzle, the police turned to the one person who had seen Zhu Yuye alive just hours before, her younger sister, Zhu Yuye. Taken to the station, Zhu Yuye was asked to recall every detail of that horrible day. With a voice still trembling from the shock, Zhu Yuye explained that the day before the tragedy, on January 14th around 5 p.m., she and her sister had ridden their motorcycles to the Chingsongling Club, as they often did, to run and exercise. Once they arrived at the club's track, they began their run together, side by side. But only 5 minutes in, Zhu Yuye started to feel the strain, her body giving way to exhaustion. She slowed her pace, but her sister, Zhu Yuye, was determined, pushing forward with energy and speed. Zhu Yuye watched as her sister disappeared into the distance, fading from view, her figure becoming a blur in the twilight. The two of them had run this track countless times before, and Zhu Yuye, trusting the familiarity of the place, didn't think much of it. She continued on, slow and steady, trailing behind, unaware of the dark fate awaiting her sister. When Zhu Yuye returned to the starting point, she did not see her sister Zhu Yuye. She thought Zhu Yuye must be running a second lap, so she sat down and waited for her. But after 20 minutes, when Zhu Yuye still hadn't returned, Zhu Yuye quickly ran off to find her. After running a few hundred meters, Zhu Yuye spotted a pair of shoes by the roadside. As she got closer, she realized that they were the shoes her sister had worn when she left. The shoes had been carelessly discarded by the road. Nearby, there was also a small hair clip that both of them used, and what made Zhu Yuye's blood run cold was the small pool of blood next to the clip. The scene was chilling. Zhu Yuye's first instinct was to call the police, but neither of them had brought their phones for convenience while running. Just as she was standing by the road trying to find someone to help, a white van sped past her. Something about the white van gave Zhu Yuye a terrible feeling. She became certain that something had happened to her sister. At that moment, a couple came walking in the distance. Zhu Yuye quickly ran up to them, borrowed their phone, and called home, explaining the situation at the scene. Her father, Zhu Renshou, and mother immediately dropped everything when they received the call. They rushed to the club, and together with the club's security personnel, they searched the entire area but found no trace of Zhu Yuye. Finally, on the advice of the club manager, Zhu Renshou reported the case to the police. After hearing Zhu Yuye's account, the police immediately started looking into suspicious vehicles, with the upscale residential area where Zhu Yuye's blood was found as a key focus. Soon enough, on the afternoon of January 16th, in a parking lot near the residential area, the police found the white van that Zhu Yuye had mentioned. And on the van, they found traces of dried blood and male semen. With the information they had gathered, the police now believed the killer had used the white van to dump Zhu Yuye's body after committing the crime at the scene. With the two clues of the white van and the upscale residential area, the police began their search and captured 6 Indonesian laborers, aged between 20 and 54, who were working at the residential complex at the time of the incident. Meanwhile, near the club where the crime took place, 4 suspicious Malay men were arrested as well. On the morning of January 18th, the police transported all the arrested suspects to the government hospital in Sungai Petani. Their blood, hair, and other samples were collected and sent to the Penang forensic team for DNA testing. But the results of DNA comparison shocked everybody. None of the suspects had DNA that matched the DNA found in Zhu Yuye's body. Later, the police disclosed that they had also arrested 9 more men in connection to the case. But unfortunately, their DNA also didn't match the evidence left inside Zhu Yuye. At this point, the investigation hit a dead end. The case became a cold case. However, the police did not give up and continued their investigations. 3 years later, in 2009, through extensive investigation, the police identified the prime suspect, 33-year-old Sharil, the son of Datuk in Malaysia. The suspicion surrounding Sharil was not without reason. There were 3 main reasons for suspicion. First, Sharil had fled the country immediately after the incident and only returned when he heard that the case was being forgotten. Second, Sharil's family owned a villa near the crime scene. Third, and most suspiciously, the white van found at the crime scene belonged to Sharil's family's bodyguard. Sharil was indeed a prime suspect. However, in Malaysia, a Datuk is a title given to individuals who have made significant contributions to the country, and it carries a very high status. If they arrested the Datuk's son, it would mean offending powerful people. As the police hesitated on whether to arrest him or not, Charles somehow got wind of the suspicious. Before they could act, he fled the country again. This time, he went to Australia, and once again, he disappeared for 3 more years. Due to the complexity of cross-border cases, arresting him became particularly troublesome, requiring diplomatic negotiations between 2 countries. In the end, the police had no choice but to let Charles go for the time being. However, the police were not entirely empty-handed. Charles' sudden flight confirmed something they had long suspected. He was, without a doubt, the killer in the Zhu Yuye case. 3 years later, in January 2020, Charles reappeared at the Malaysian airport. This time, before he even had a chance to leave the airport, the police, lying in wait, seized him. After bringing him back to the police station, the authorities immediately collected his DNA samples. After the comparison, the police informed the media, confirming that Charles was indeed the killer of Zhu Yuye. Senior police officials promised that the killer would be severely punished, giving the victim's family the justice they deserved. But the situation took another turn. Although it had already been confirmed that Charles was the one who killed Zhu Yuye, no sooner had the police issued their announcement that Charles was bailed out. Enraged, the public took to the streets, protesting and pressuring the government. Under the weight of public opinion, the case finally went to trial on June 25, 2013. But the court's verdict once again disappointed the public. Even though it had been confirmed that Charles' semen was found on the victim, the court still acquitted him. The reasoning was that while Charles' semen was found in the victim's private parts, it didn't prove that Charles was one who killed him. The reasoning was that while Charles' semen was found in the victim's private parts, it didn't prove that Charles was the one who killed her. Upon hearing the verdict, the crowd in the courtroom gasped in disbelief. Zhu Yuye's father was beside himself with grief. In his agony, he even considered leaping over the courtroom barrier to end his life, hoping that it would awaken the sick society that had allowed such injustice. Just as Zhu Renshou was about to jump, a quick-thinking reporter stopped him. With urgency, the reporter spoke these vital words. "Mr. Zhu, I know you are deeply dissatisfied and angry with this verdict. We all know this result is unjust, but I ask you to gather strength. You must continue to fight Miss Zhu's justice. Believe me, a single spark can start a fire." The reporter's words gave Zhu Renshou immense courage. He knew he wasn't fighting alone. There were countless people standing by him. Afterward, Zhu Renshou and his family began to walk the streets of Pentani, distributing pamphlets with the details of Zhu Yuye's case to everyone they could reach. Meanwhile, the court's unjust verdict spread through every household in Malaysia. Such an unfair decision naturally ignited anger in countless working-class families. This was the oppression and exploitation of the powerless by the powerful. If they chose silence now, there would be more cases like Zhu Yuye's in the future. To seek justice for Zhu Yuye and to give a voice to the common people, a massive movement of citizens rallied to support the Zhu family. They helped the family bring the case to the Attorney General's office. In July 2014, the Attorney General's office took the case and found Charles guilty of rape and murder, sentencing him to life imprisonment. But how could such a result ever compensate for Zhu Yuye's life? And as the son of a wealthy and powerful family, Charles, though sentenced to life imprisonment, was likely never to serve his time. Thus, the fight for justice for Zhu Yuye was far from over. The Zhu family's struggle was just beginning. The public was once again dissatisfied with the Attorney General's decision, and once again they took to the streets to protest. With the help of the masses, the Zhu family succeeded in taking their case to the federal court. In 2018, the federal court took up the case of Zhu Yuye's murder, fairly and justly reconstructing every detail of the crime. Due to the brutality of Charles' actions and the severe impact of the case, the federal court's final judgment was as follows. Charles was sentenced to death for both premeditated murder and rape, with the death penalty to be carried out immediately. When the final verdict was announced, Zhu Yuye's family couldn't hold back their tears, crying uncontrollably. It was just too much. They had fought for 12 long years to finally get a result that satisfied them, to finally give Zhu Yuye the justice she deserved. Now she could finally rest in peace. Just 2 days before the incident, Zhu Yuye's workplace was about to send her to Germany for a week for further training. Had she not been murdered, Zhu Yuye would have already returned from her training in Germany, becoming a successful professional woman. But such a promising young woman had her life stolen by the insane Cheryl. Even though, in the end, the killer faced justice and was punished, Zhu Yuye's precious life could never return. The loss of a loved one is not a storm that passes quickly, but a long, lingering dampness in life. Her family would spend their lives trying to heal the pain of losing her. Thank you for listening. This is Charles Crime Story channel, bringing you in-depth crime analysis. If you like this channel, please subscribe, comment. Have a case you want me to share, put you in the comment section. Thank you so much. I'll see you next time.